oftentimes it shows up in how we behave. So oftentimes it will be self-sabotage, it'll be procrastination, it'll be like hiding or playing small. These are all things that can happen when we don't feel like we're enough, right? When we're focused on like, oh, other people are better, I don't belong, I don't know enough, whatever it is. So really just taking inventory of how is that showing up in your life, right? And then starting to practice. I believe that worthiness is a choice. You're always going to have that voice in your head that says, like, oh, you could be better, right? But are you going to listen to that voice? Or are you going to choose to find something that you appreciate about yourself? Are you going to choose to decide, no, I belong here, right? Because no matter how much validation we get from other people, whether it's a partner or a friend or a teacher or a mentor, like that external validation is never going to be enough if we're not doing it for ourselves.
Welcome to the Bridge Podcast, a podcast featuring heart-centered leaders, artists, healers, speakers, and creatives who are leading a new paradigm through their own personal embodiment. Join us to explore the evolution of humanity that we see happening on our planet and how the intersection of art and humanity may be the key to having a new experience on Earth, as we individually and collectively choose to align with a greater peace, unity, harmony, and unconditional love in our everyday lives. Together, we will explore inspiring, insightful, and healing conversations that tap us into the artist within, empower us to be the conscious creators of our reality, and amplify the world we want to see by coming home to our own divinity. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Bridge Podcast. I'm so excited and grateful that you're here to share this journey, to share this episode. It's going to be such a special episode. When I sat down with Amy, our beautiful guest today, it was truly such a deeply comforting and inspiring conversation that really brought me a lot of healing to different parts of my journey, just to sit with her and to hear about her story and what she's learned and what she's been through. And I am so grateful that she is here to share her wisdom with us today. In this episode, we talk about discovering your true authentic self and releasing the fear of judgment, prioritizing your own happiness, tuning into universal guidance to support making changes in your life, connecting with the divine feminine to break free from negative self-talk, how to flow between both masculine and feminine energies to support your goals and your well-being, and how to follow your intuition and trust yourself to make decisions. We also discuss some of the key shifts on her journey of personal development and spiritual growth, how she alchemized her experience of anxiety and depression, how to connect with your feminine magnetism, how to deepen physical and emotional intimacy in your relationships, how and why to infuse pleasure into your day-to-day life, and the true power of connecting with your cyclical nature for sustainable energy. Amy Natalie is an author, podcast host, and a women's empowerment coach with over a decade of coaching experience. She specializes in helping women to emerge as the most authentic, confident, and self-expressed versions of themselves. Her mission is to ignite women into their feminine power so that they can live a life of freedom, pleasure, fulfillment, and purpose. Amy is the author of The Feminine Way and the host of the Feminine Frequency podcast, which has over 360 episodes reaching women all around the globe. I'm so excited that you're here, and I really hope this episode serves you and inspires you to live a more authentic life aligned with your feminine frequency. Let's dive in. Welcome, Amy, to the Bridge Podcast. I am so excited to have you here today. You are such a radiant light and example of embodiment, living in your truth, authenticity, and the feminine frequency. And so I'm so grateful that you said yes to coming on here and to sharing some of your journey, some of your wisdom, and taking us on a bit of a ride as to how you became who you are today. So welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. To start us off, I would love to, for those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came to be who you are today? Where did your journey start and how did you come into this amazing, beautiful, radiant woman that you are? And then we can dive into some of the details and all of that. So welcome and tell us about you.
Thank you so much for having me here. It is always such an honor to get to connect with other women who are on their spiritual growth and personal development journeys. And, when I remember back when I was listening to podcasts when I was,
Mhm.
in the beginning phases of my journey. And it really was so supportive for me to hear different perspectives, to get to learn new insights, and to really get to see, like, what other people had been through and see examples of what was possible. So back then, when I kind of rewind into my mid 20s, I was in a lot of darkness in my own mental health. I struggled with chronic depression and anxiety for over a decade. And I really, was searching, I was seeking. And I on the surface, if you looked at my life on the outside, you very much would not be able to tell that I was struggling. I had a pretty picture perfect life on the outside. I kind of like to call it the white picket fence lifestyle. I was in my mid 20s. I got married. We bought a house together. We had a dog who was super cute. And we had this really, supportive community around us. And I realized after a few years of being in that relationship that I was stuck in the role of the good girl and the people pleaser. And really, I had molded my personality and my decisions to fit the expectations and the desires of the people around me, more specifically, my parents. And I grew up in a more traditional religious community.
Mhm.
And I started to go deeper into my inquiry of, like, why am I so unhappy? Right? Why am I waking up and like everything seems like it should be okay, but I don't feel okay? And on top of that, like I had so much negative self-talk. I was so hard on myself. I had really negative body image. I was having a lot of health issues at the time. I had chronic digestive issues. I was bloated. I had stomach aches. I had hormone imbalances. And it was a really challenging time in my life. And that is what led me to my spiritual path. That's what led me to these deeper inquiries of, what makes me happy and what do I really want in my life and what is my purpose here? And it was through those inquiries that I realized that part of the reason why I was so unhappy is because I was living out of alignment with my soul, with myself, and I was trying to be who other people wanted me to be. And so I remember sitting in the bathtub, and this is after like several years of being in this deep inquiry. And I was like, I have tried everything. I'm so exhausted of trying to figure this out. And I finally looked up and I was like, God, universe, whoever's out there, like, I need help. Like, I have tried everything. I'm exhausted. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be in this marriage. Like, I know something has to change. And from that point of really surrendering and asking for guidance, I started to listen. And I was waking up at that time with like horrible anxiety early in the morning. And the only thing that I knew how to do was go and sit and meditate. And started meditating and I started listening and I started getting these, like, hearing my inner voice and hearing this voice of like, you can't keep trying to make everyone else happy at the expense of your own happiness. Like, are you going to keep doing this to yourself, essentially? And eventually, I made the most courageous decision of my life. It was the hardest decision to make. And I left my marriage and I really started living life according to my authentic self and started to connect to my feminine energy and my soul and my creativity and my aliveness. And that's really where everything shifted. It was a like a huge turning point in my life.
Wow, what a beautiful journey. Thank you for sharing all of that. And there's bits and pieces of it that I resonate with so much. And also being in just my late 20s now, it's beautiful to hear from someone who's been through that, who has those experiences, because it is so important to hear from those who have walked things a little bit before us or just a slightly different journey. And we can get so much out of that. Like you said, listening to podcasts was really valuable for you. And I've also listened to things for majority of my 20s, and that's how I've gotten to be who I am today. So when you talk about the authenticity that you found and started to live within, can you tell us a little bit about how you knew that that was your authentic self and what that actually looked like to start living from her? and how different that might have been or any challenges with that. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, totally. So I feel like the word authentic self gets thrown around a lot, and I feel like women know what it is. It's like we know when we're living out of alignment with ourselves, when we feel like we're kind of like performing or we're wearing these masks where we're pretending everything's okay, but internally we're like, this doesn't feel right. Like there's that inner dissonance. It's a feeling that we get, right? And a lot of that comes from the fear of being rejected, the fear of judgment, and ultimately, deeper down, it comes from this deeper survival mechanism of like, if people don't love me or if I'm not liked, then I'm not going to survive.
Mhm.
And back in the day, that was true. If when we were tribal beings, if we were outcast from the tribe,
Mhm.
we wouldn't be able to survive, right? So it actually comes down to this deeper, even like nervous system survival mechanism of why we modify our behavior, our decisions, our personality in order to try to be liked and accepted. Now, the more that we do that, the further we get away from our true essence, our true self. And this could look like a lot of different things. This could look like who you date, who you decide to be in relationships with. You know, my parents really wanted me to get married to someone who was of the same religion, who was Jewish, and that was really important to them. Followed
Mhm.
that path. It can come down to how do you dress? It can come down to what activities you do, what passions you follow or don't follow. You know, there's a lot of people who are creative people and who want to follow their own path of what lights them up and what excites them. But then there's all these narratives of that's not going to work. You're not going to be successful. Like that's not a real career path. So it shows up in a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
And the way that we can start to come back to our true self is really start to connect deeper, create space to listen through
Mhm.
journaling, through meditation, through therapy, through coaching to really get deeper into that inquiry of who am I without the masks, without all the expectations, without who everyone else wants me to be. And we can start to ask ourselves the questions like, what lights me up? What do I want to do? What makes me happy? And it could be small things to start. Like when I first started asking myself those questions, it was really hard for me to answer them. I was like, I don't know what I like. Like I grew up as a dancer and I loved dancing, but I had stopped
Ew.
liking dancing because I was like so in my head about it and so judgmental and didn't like my body, right? So it was
Yeah.
like, okay, come back to some things that I like. I like dancing. It feels good when I'm in nature. It feels good to, focus on my health and my personal growth. These are coming back to some of your core values, like what is important to me,
Mhm.
right? And then it is a journey because you still have that inner fear and that inner conflict of, okay, how can I start showing up as that version of myself? Are people going to accept me? Am I going to lose friends? Are people going to be disappointed by me if I really show the real me? And the
Mhm.
last piece I'll share here is like some of the pieces that I was most afraid to share as my authentic self was my sensitivity, my emotions,
Mhm.
my sensuality of, I am a very sensual person and I was hiding that because there was a lot of cultural programming around like that being inappropriate or wrong. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then, I would really, hide the part of me that had those deeper emotions because when I was younger, like those weren't really encouraged for me to feel. So even small things like that is starting to really, dress a certain way differently, or when people ask, how are you? Actually sharing, hey, I'm actually having kind of a hard time right now, or I'm not feeling
Mhm.
great today, or whatever, like giving a real answer instead of like the surface level of like, I'm good, I'm fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, this is incredibly important and I love what you said about being a dancer because I also grew up as a dancer and I hit a point when I was 18 where I just wanted to move away from all of that because I wanted the freedom, and I'd lived within that structure as a dancer for so many years, and I was so in my head, and I wanted to access my heart and my soul and explore different things. And at first it was very difficult to do that, but also now coming back to dance from a different consciousness level, from a more embodied place, is such a blessing, and it's so worth it to go through all of that growth. And I also really resonate with the piece about our emotions and our sensitivity and actually sharing that. And you reminded me of one story that I won't tell the whole story, but I was just in a cab or an Uber or something. And I think I was traveling, and the person asked me how I was. And I was honest about not being great at the time. And whatever I said, this person was like, "You changed my whole life. Like, thank you so much for being honest." And it just opened up so much love. And I haven't thought about that in a really long time. But those moments where we're authentic and we allow ourselves to say what's really there can actually change so much, not just for the people around us, but for the world, because it's rippling out. That authenticity is rippling out, and it connects to everybody else's hearts too. So that was a beautiful point there. And to connect to that, I would love to hear if you had any challenges with that. I know you mentioned the judgment, you mentioned some of the things that were hard at first, and how did you move through that? I know self-compassion is important to you as well. It's an embodiment pillar, really, and it's been very important for me too. So, what are some of those things that you maybe struggled with, and how did you bring compassion to that? What's an actual kind of process that you go through, or something you could share for people that are very new to that? The importance of self-compassion and how that has helped you come to who you are today.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think self-compassion is really the key to making changes in your life and to really honoring that there are going to be some challenges that come up along the way. And like really, if we're coming from a place of self-judgment and like even internalizing the judgment from other people, like that's not going to help us to feel better or to follow our passions or to live the life that's meant for us, right? I'll give a really, personal example, especially when I was going through my divorce. Like my ex-husband, we were good friends when we were together, and there were some value misalignments and lifestyle misalignments that I didn't know before we got together because I didn't really know myself. I met him when I was 23. We got married when I was 25. And like as I started to get to know myself, I was like, oh, like he's a really good person. And like this isn't fully aligned with what I want in partnership or what I want in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we separated, naturally he was, felt really hurt. He felt disappointed, etc. And even as he was expressing that to me, because we had many conversations where he was pissed, and because he was hurt, he said some not so nice things to me, right? And in those conversations, I remember like taking deep breaths, and I remember just offering myself like so much kindness and so much compassion of like, Amy, I love you. Like, you're not a bad person. Like, it's okay if someone's upset with you, and that doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. And I would have to like really offer myself that forgiveness and also that compassion of like, I was doing the best that I could. And, the biggest thing that I learned in that relationship was like to really fully speak my truth and to honor my truth. And I knew for a long time that the relationship wasn't right, but I was so afraid of hurting him that I didn't fully speak my truth, or when I did, it was like misunderstood. So I think that we also get to just have compassion for, younger versions of ourselves, where like we're doing the best that we can with what we know. And the only way to learn is through these experiences, often of contrast, of showing up in ways that maybe that like weren't the best ways, or making mistakes, or learning through challenges, and recognizing like we're human, like we all have shadow, we all have these parts and these ways of being that we're not perfect. And I think that's been such a big journey for me, is like really getting out of that perfectionism and expecting myself to be perfect. And the last piece that I'll share here around self-compassion is this, like I think especially when we're on a personal growth journey, we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and like this idea that like we should be further along, or that we shouldn't ever have a negative emotion or negative thoughts. Like we have this whole like idea of what that means to be where we want to be, or that everything in our life should be working out, right? And I think there's a difference when we're approaching personal growth from a place of like self-love, of I'm really proud of myself for how far I've gotten. I'm really proud of where I am right now. And like I still aspire to grow and continue to be a better version of myself, versus when we're coming from this place of like being really hard on ourselves, telling ourselves that we're not enough as we are, so we need to grow in order to fix ourselves. Like that's not a very compassionate or loving way of
Mhm.
approaching personal growth. So that's something that I love to bring to this conversation. And inner child healing has been such a huge component of this journey for me as well.
Yes, inner child healing is one of my favorite practices and ways of life now. Truly, once you've kind of been doing the work for several years, it just becomes, for me, it becomes play. I have that childlike wonder now when I have a shadow come up. The curiosity, the compassion, the self-love is pretty much second nature majority of the time, which I'm very proud of. And it's taken a lot to get there, but it's almost like, when you talk about the shadow being part of our life, everybody has that. And I think one of the biggest things that we could focus on to better our lives and our society and our world is actually our relationship to the shadows and how we're dancing with them, and almost returning to that childlike innocence too, where we can be so curious about what we're feeling and create such a safe and loving space for those parts of ourselves to reemerge and come into love and harmony with our authenticity, and actually move from that place of embodiment where we kind of feel like we're a new person, but we're really returning to who we've always been, and that wholeness, which is just the sweetest space to live in. Um, so thank you for sharing all of your experiences on that. And one thing you have mentioned a few times is the relationship that you were in. And I know you're in a new beautiful relationship now. What has your journey been within relationships, but also the relationship with yourself when it comes to masculine and feminine energies? What is your perspective, or how would you describe the difference between the masculine and the feminine for someone who's maybe new to that, or just your experience with your own journey of those energies within yourself and how that has impacted or shifted your relationships coming into that?
Yeah, this was so life-changing for me to learn about masculine and feminine energy. And it was something that's really changed not just my romantic relationships, but a lot of other aspects of my life. So I first learned about masculine and feminine energy when it was actually through a certification and like a facilitator training that I was taking that was all about eating psychology. And it was
Mm,
about like really looking at the deeper reasons why we make certain health choices, certain food choices, and how we relate to our body. And what I realized was even how I was approaching like my health journey was coming from a very masculine place. It was like masculine energy is very calculated, it's very linear, it's very like heady, it's very in your mind. It's very structured. It can, if it goes too far, it can be very like controlled,
yeah.
right? And I realized that I was also being that way in my relationship, and that in my marriage, our polarity wasn't aligned. So I was more in my masculine, and oftentimes he was more in his feminine. We just were not on the same page with that. And I was very disconnected from my body. I was very disconnected from my intuition. I was disconnected from, I wasn't expressing my emotions from a vulnerable place. I was very analyzing my emotions in
Mhm.
that way. And I wasn't super connected to my pleasure in my body. So I realized that one of the things that was out of alignment in that relationship was our polarity. And there were some other underlying pieces that were not aligned. And so once I learned about that, I really committed to learning about how do I create more balance with my masculine and feminine energy inside of me, right? Not just in my relationships, but like in my own life. Masculine energy can often be described as doing energy. It's like you're always going, you're always doing, you're always productive, you're never taking breaks, you're always achieving, accomplishing, right? And feminine energy is more of the being. It's more of the nurturing, it's the creativity, it's the pleasure, right? It's the intuition. So we need both of them. We need our masculine energy. We do need some structure. We do need direction. We need to take action. And we need the feminine aspects, but we don't want to be in either of them too much, right? So as I started to learn how to connect with my feminine energy, and I wrote a whole book on how to do that. A lot of them are like, how do I connect with my feminine energy? I'm like, here's the guidebook, right? So in the book, I talk about 7 feminine principles or 7 feminine codes to help you to unlock your feminine energy, because I believe that we all have feminine energy in us. We all have masculine energy in us, and our culture has just really emphasized the importance of the masculine qualities, right? And we've forgotten about this deep wisdom that the feminine has to offer, right? The wisdom of connecting with nature, the wisdom of listening to our bodies, the wisdom of rest, the wisdom of being with our emotions. Like, we've forgotten about the value of that. So yeah, using these 7 codes, we can really connect back home to ourselves. And as I started doing that, what I realized and what was reflected back to me in my relationships is a lot more depth of connection, even in my female friendships. Like, because I was softer and because I was, not in my head all the time, I started to feel more open and more connected and started to have deeper connections with my friends. And then, same thing in romantic relationships. I started having deeper emotional and physical intimacy and started attracting partners who were more in their masculine, right? And so my current partnership, we've been together for a little bit over 2 years now, and I can feel such a depth of emotional and physical intimacy, and we both are actively cultivating both of those energies within ourselves, right? And we're
Right.
both very connected to those energies within ourselves. And yeah, that was what I was calling in. I wanted to be with a man who was like really grounded and rooted, but also connected to his heart, right? Like, I wanted
Hmm.
someone who could express his emotions and
Hmm.
and be
Hmm.
vulnerable with me too.
That's beautiful. And there's so many layers to how our relationships can evolve and grow and thrive when we have that awareness. And for me, for sure, having the awareness of those different energies and how we shift between them as humans allows me to have deeper relationships with the people around me simply because I know that they're more than what might be on the surface. They have so much more going on for them. And as I give myself permission to live within that range and within all of those parts of myself, of the masculine and feminine, and have more of a balance, I also make my presence a space for others to access that for themselves. And relationships are truly so inspiring to me because they're such mirrors. And like you said, when you change yourself, you start to change the experiences you have in relationships. And especially when it comes to intimacy, we never are going to feel safe with somebody else unless we feel safe with ourselves first. And we access that within ourselves, and then the people outside of us can amplify that and support that and be a part of that. But it's truly a co-creation, just like our everyday life is a co-creation with God, spirit, source, universe, and that masculine feminine dance of taking action, having direction, having clarity, like you said, but also being so surrendered to the magic and being in your feminine of your human experience and letting the universe also meet you halfway. So there's many, many aspects to that conversation that I really love to talk about. But one thing that you kind of mentioned that I would love to talk more about is within intimacy and embodied intimacy, how did you access your sensuality for those who maybe are curious about that right now or exploring that for themselves? What was your experience accessing that sensuality, being comfortable in your sensuality, and how did that support your intimacy? And what are some of the maybe practices or things that have helped you in that aspect?
Yeah, I love this conversation because so much has shifted for me in this area.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned earlier, like I've always been a sensual person, and I've always been really curious in when it comes to sex and intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And because I grew up in a more traditional background and religious background, there was always a part of me that was like, oh, this is wrong and bad. And at the same time, there was a part of me that was like, oh, this feels great and I want to explore this more. So because of that, and I would say even like a lack of education around my body and around, what brings me pleasure, what feels good for me, like we don't get that education as women of like understanding how our bodies work. And so after I got divorced, I really went on this deeper journey of exploring like myself and my body. And I went to a pole dancing class, which was like something that like I never thought I would do. It was so freeing and so liberating to be able to move my body and in a space with other women where it wasn't about the male gaze. It wasn't about how other people would perceive me, but it was simply for my own pleasure and for to feel good in the way that I was moving. And so that was really huge for me. And I saw women with all different body shapes from all different backgrounds, like moving in this sensual way. And it took away a lot of that stigma of body image and of, sexuality being bad. It opened up the door. I
Mm-hmm.
also dove deep into studying what embodiment was and what that meant, and really started to drop into sensual movement practices where I would, intuitively move my body and explore different expressions, different sounds, different movements, not from the lens of what does it look like, but more what does it feel like. So you mentioned earlier with dancing, like growing up, dancing can be very competitive. It can be very much about what it looks like, being the best dancer, being the most flexible, doing it perfectly. And that's kind of like the opposite of embodiment. Embodiment is moving freely and listening to the music and connecting with your breath and tuning into like what movements feel really good for me. And embodiment often is more like these more circular movements rather than these like linear movements that we learn when like with
Yeah.
choreography a lot of the time. So exploring embodiment was huge for me. Going to ecstatic dance was also huge for me. And then when it came to, physical pleasure, it was getting to know my body. I read a lot of books learning about anatomy. There's a book by a woman named Sherry Winston called, I think it's called The Anatomy of Female Arousal or something like that. And it's like such an easy book, but to really get to know like what actually does it take for the female body to get turned on? And I used to focus so much on pleasing my partners, and it was a part of a way of getting like validation and of, making sure that they wanted me, right? And that was like such a programming from a young age of wanting to get that validation. And I felt uncomfortable receiving. I felt uncomfortable being the focus of attention. And so I started to explore in my own self-pleasure practice what feels good for me and started to explore my own body and then started to invite partners into that and really allow myself to explore what it was like to receive, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to allow myself to feel pleasure. And what happened was as I started to explore more and express more and receive more pleasure, it actually like allowed for my partners to be more turned on and feel more pleasure for themselves too. And just creating this deeper sense of intimacy where I wasn't in my head all the time. That's a huge thing for women where they're in their head, like, oh my God, why is it taking me so long to orgasm? Like, why can't I get turned on? All of these things. And when we start to understand female arousal, it's like it takes a woman 20 to 30 minutes to actually get aroused, right? With men, it's different. And so,
Mm-hmm.
even just giving yourself space and time and not rushing things and allowing for more foreplay and slowing things down, that's like a huge game changer for couples and for women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one piece about feeling super uncomfortable to receive, or there's so many reasons why that can occur for women. And For anybody, really, a lot of us might find that we feel uncomfortable receiving, whether it's love, pleasure, attention, it's being seen, it's being known, being actually received and connected to by somebody on a more authentic level. And if we've never really done that, or we're not used to doing that in our life and having safe relationship, then that's a whole new terrain to enter into. And it does take time. You mentioned that it does take time, and it takes so much grace and compassion and curiosity and learning. And also, the big piece that you've mentioned is taking that time for yourself and creating that space so that not only you can get aroused in a way that's authentic, but in life in general, where do you need to make space for yourself to actually access what's true for you, and move from that place and move from your heart and kind of get out of that mental space where you might be trying to control everything or trying to protect yourself all the time because you're just used to doing that. And I like to say, I like to bring that up, and it's been very true from my experience too, how it's not an overnight change, no matter what growth we're working through. It's very much a gradual expansion that happens with a lot of little choices, a lot of that work over time that may seem tedious or seem small, but it's actually going to create those bigger changes in our life. And they always come in divine timing if we stay devoted, right? So very, very important points there, and a really powerful topic. And that I want to go into a little bit of the self-trust and deepening self-trust as well with that, because not just with sexuality and relationship, but just in life, how do you expand on and deepen your self-trust? And what would you say to others about that journey, if they're curious how they can do that too?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think from a young age, we look externally for people to tell us how to do things. And when we're kids, we kind of have to do that
Yeah.
because we don't know how to move throughout the world. And like we have to trust our parents and trust other people to guide us to show us, how to move through the world.
Mhm.
And we have a lot of programming and messaging specifically as women of like you can't trust your intuition, like kind of things like, oh, that's a silly idea, or like you're being too emotional, like that's an emotional decision, you shouldn't listen to that. So we
Mhm.
get all these messages that we should be more logical, that we should follow the rules, that we should do it the way that everyone else is doing it. And every time we do that, and we don't listen to ourselves, we are losing trust with ourselves, right? And I kind of like to think of it as a relationship with yourself or relationship with someone else. Like if you were in a relationship with someone else and your trust was broken, it's going to take time to rebuild that trust, right?
Mhm.
So I actually first think that it starts with some forgiveness. And I work with a lot of women around this. And a big place where this shows up is in relationships and intimacy. A lot of women are like, I said yes to being intimate with someone or to doing something sexually when like I really didn't want to do that. And so I betrayed myself, right? So there's opportunities where we actually have to look and like look back and
Mhm.
forgive that version of yourself and realize like sometimes we learn how to trust ourselves by like making mistakes and or by doing something that didn't feel good, and then we're like, oh yeah, like I didn't actually listen to myself, and here's what happened, right? So we get to be gentle with ourselves and work on like forgiving the past version of ourselves.
Mhm.
Now, when it comes to rebuilding trust, I like to start with some really simple practices that don't have a lot of risk or don't have a lot on the line.
Mhm.
So, people want to, or like, I want to trust my intuition to like make these big decisions. I'm like, great, well, let's start small. Let's actually start in places where, you can play around with it, you can experiment with it. Some of those places are, when it comes to even like what you're going to eat or what you want to wear. And
Mhm.
it's like, you can't mess it up, right? Like you really can't mess it up. And
Mhm.
it, tuning into, okay, what do I feel like eating right now? Do I feel like something warm? Do I feel like something cold? Do I feel like something like a big meal? Do I feel like a smaller meal? Like tuning into like what feels good to me instead of I should eat protein, carbs, and fat, or I should eat a salad for lunch, right? You're not listening to yourself when you're doing that. You're listening to the rules. So even starting to tune into that. could also be around, social events where you're like, okay, do I actually want to go to that? Does it feel right for me to spend time with that person? Does it feel right for me to go to that event? Yes or no, tuning into your body. Your
Mm-hmm.
yes is going to feel expansive. It's going to feel light. Your
Mm-hmm.
no is going to feel like we all know what that deeper no feels like, right? But when you haven't been listening to your body and you haven't been listening to your intuition, it takes time to listen to that. So slowing down, tuning in, and one other piece is like for me, meditation has been so huge to really hearing those little whispers, right? Because our intuition is usually really soft. It's not this loud voice in our head. It's usually really quiet. And the more that we're in that space of meditation and of self-inquiry and listening, the more that we can hear those whispers, we can hear our inner truth. And
Mm-hmm.
then the next step is like honoring that truth, is making decisions in alignment with that.
Right. Yeah, so well said. And what's coming to my mind around this too is a piece about worthiness. And I'm curious if what your experience is with feeling worthy or not worthy, what your journey has been with that as a woman in the world, and with all of the amazing things that you've stepped into and said yes to yourself. And that takes a lot of self trust and self awareness and a relationship to yourself where you can support yourself and love yourself through that journey. But feeling worthy is such a specific thing that I think everyone can relate to on some level. But especially with this particular topic, I'm curious if and where worthiness came up for you and how you moved through that and deepened your self trust through feeling unworthy and knowing that you actually are. Because I know you also mentioned this on one of your podcast episodes that I listened to today, and your journey with knowing that you're worthy and knowing that you're meant to be in the spaces and in the places that are coming into your life. And so, how has that journey been for you?
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know anyone, male or female, who hasn't had some form of unworthiness, this feeling of not being enough. Maybe it's you're feeling you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not creative enough, like whatever, And it is definitely a practice of learning how to cultivate that feeling of feeling worthy. Like, I deserve to be happy. I deserve to receive love. I deserve to receive abundance, right?
Mhm.
Like, I deserve to be in this friends group, right? And that was definitely not the case for a long time. I think when it comes to worthiness, I often look at like, what is your self-talk? What are you saying to yourself? Right? Are you constantly focusing on the things that you're not good at? Are you constantly putting yourself down, being hypercritical about yourself? If so, you're feeding that unworthiness voice inside of your head, right?
Mhm.
And similarly, if we want to build our self-worth, we really have to start to acknowledge the things that we're good at, start to acknowledge what we're proud of ourselves for, start to acknowledge the progress that we've made. So our culture doesn't teach us to celebrate ourselves, to be proud of ourselves. It's like we need to be modest. Like we shouldn't brag, we shouldn't be boastful, but it can be really harmful if we're not taking time to really acknowledge, okay, this is what I did well today, right? So, I think first place is bringing awareness to, like, where do I not feel good enough? And where is that story showing up and preventing me from taking action? Oftentimes, it's not like just this loud voice in your head where it's like, I'm not good enough. Oftentimes, it shows up in how we behave. So, oftentimes, it will be self sabotage, it'll be procrastination, it'll be like hiding or playing small. These are all things that can happen when we don't feel like we're enough, right? When we're focused on like, oh, other people are better, I don't belong, I don't know enough, whatever it is. So really just taking inventory of how is that showing up in your life, right?
Yeah.
And then starting to practice. I believe that worthiness is a choice. You're always going to have that voice in your head that says like, oh, you could be better, right? But are you going to listen to that voice, or are you going to choose to find something that you appreciate about yourself? Are you
Mm-hmm.
going to choose to decide, no, I belong here, right? Because no matter how much validation we get from other people, whether it's a partner or a friend or a teacher or a mentor, like that external validation is never going to be enough if we're not doing it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a daily practice, I would say.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautifully said. One thing you reminded me of in how much of a choice it is that I always tell myself and my clients, identify with your light, define yourself by your light and your heart and your inspiration and your joy and what you love and what people love about you, and spend time really amplifying that and celebrating that and doing the things that make you feel like that person. And then you'll kind of slowly move away, or that shadow self will feel a little bit quieter, and it's easier to notice it, to spot it, and to help it integrate into that light, rather than it feeling like this battle or something that's just taking over all the time unconsciously. And that's also a blessing, though I'll say that it's also a gift when that gets really loud in our life, because it's easier to see. It's trying to reveal itself, I believe, so that we can shift, we can integrate it, we can actually move towards the things that we want, and no longer be controlled by something that we didn't know that it was even there before, really. We may have known because we felt it in some way, but we weren't clear on what it was and why. And sometimes that deep excavation can be supportive, and other times it doesn't need to be a deep excavation. You can simply choose, I don't want to feel this way. I don't want to believe this. I want to feel better. I choose to be worthy. And it may take years, it may take telling yourself that 1,000 times, but if you keep choosing that and then choosing in alignment with that new frequency, your life will start to support that. And you will come into that new embodiment of feeling more of who you actually are in your heart, your soul, what makes you unique, and not this identity that you became to survive, essentially, and protect yourself.
So one other thing that I see happen when it comes around worthiness is that a lot of people will start to say affirmations like "I'm enough," "I'm worthy as I am," and those are super powerful. Like they're really important to do. And I like to take it a layer deeper. And the layer deeper is more on the somatic level. And it's more of, okay, what would it feel like in my body if I truly believed that I was enough? And a lot of times people will say I would feel calm. I would
Mhm.
feel grounded. I would feel peaceful. I would feel more confident, right? And then I have them close their eyes and I have them actually breathe in and feel like, what does it feel like in my body when I feel like I'm enough?
Mm,
And starting to really insource that on a somatic level, because when we don't feel like we're enough, we constantly are striving. We feel anxious because we feel like we need to do things, we need to prove things, we need to try
mm,
harder. We can't be in that relaxed, confident, grounded state. And so, starting to reprogram even your nervous system and showing your nervous system and your body, like, what would it feel like if I already felt worthy? And even taking like a couple minutes to sit there in that and breathe that in, that feeling of calm, that feeling of peace. And then from that place, when you've anchored that in, then it's like, okay, what decisions would I make, or what's an action that I would take from this place of self-worth where I'm not trying to prove myself, right? From this place of I already know I'm enough.
mhm,
So the action might be, oh, I would give myself permission to rest. I would let myself take some time today to do some self-care because I
mhm,
know I don't need to prove anything.
mhm,
Or I would, say yes to that invitation because I know that I belong there. I know that I'm worthy of being there. So that's kind of like the deeper layers. I used to focus a lot on mindset work, and it's a big part of the foundation. But once people have already done therapy and already done a lot of mindset work, this is the next layer. It's the embodiment and the somatics that then allows us to show up as the worthy version of ourselves, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, deeper layers.
Yes, yes. And that's super important. And I was feeling into that as well, because that's a daily practice for me, is what is the frequency that I want to feel. And sometimes the chaos or trauma loops or different things that we can experience that we've developed over time to feel safe if our true expression or whatever it was that we was authentic to us wasn't actually received or wasn't made space for. All of these different stories and identities can get super, super wrapped up around your heart and around your authenticity. And I have definitely experienced that. And so sometimes when that's spinning, I might need to have a mini moment of a breakdown or just express anger or something with myself. I'll just say what I'm feeling, which always helps, especially when you have that self compassion and that self love to allow yourself the space that you didn't have. That's that reparenting on a somatic level, too, where you have the feeling just like you would do with a child. You need to let them have the feeling, and then you can redirect it and you can rewrite that neural pathway, right? And so I always ask myself, what is the frequency that I want to feel or that I want to tap into? And then, like you said, I will get into that space first and do what makes me feel that way. And then what does that version of me do next? And how do they approach it? And I think I don't remember who it is, but someone who wrote the book, The Right Questions, or something like that. It's a really powerful practice of asking better questions and asking from the space of what we want to feel as well, because you're only going to get an answer that's as good as the question you're asking, right? So allowing ourselves to expand in that way too, and kind of become, of course, support and therapy and coaches and friends and family can all be a part of it, but also becoming what we want in our life as well and becoming what we want to see in the world. And all of it starts with us in all of these ways, in all of these places. And it is deep. It is deep. We do go through so much in childhood. And I think at least from my experience, I had an amazing childhood, but I had this experience of parts of myself emotionally that I didn't feel I could fully be in and fully express. And I didn't have necessarily a repair or regulation example within my family dynamics. So my emotional world got really chaotic and really kind of compartmentalized. And that's also the space of my self trust. My emotions guide a lot of what I do. I'm very feminine in that way in how I approach life, but my mind is very masculine. So all of these layers as to how we explore how these energies show up within ourselves and where they came from or why they developed in the way that they did can be fun. It can be more playful. We can have inquiry about it, but I know it can feel also really hard and really challenging if you've gotten used to or comfortable in negative emotions or negative identities, negative self-talk. And it is, just to reiterate, a journey. It's a practice, and you just got to keep going and keep trying new things and do the things that work and ask for help, ask for support, because we're all on that journey as humans. We all have our own unique path that we're on, and there's a lot more similarities with people than differences. It's just a matter of being courageous and opening up and talking about that, right? But it's very healing for not only ourselves but for others as well. In all of that, is there anything you want to share around negative emotions or how you have specifically rewritten some of those in your own experience? What are some of the ones that you struggled with the most? Like when it comes to doubt or fear or shame, have there been any specific things you've done that have really helped you transform those roots within yourself that really made you feel like you had more space in your life for your authenticity and for your truth? I'd love to know.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think as a feminine being and as, just women who have, menstrual cycles, right? We do go through such a range of emotions throughout our cycles and also throughout our lives. Like it brings up a lot for us. And I think I'll first start by sharing, like, I don't feel like there are negative emotions. And I feel like that's something that really helped me was like
Mm.
really embracing and welcoming that like all emotions serve a purpose and all emotions are here for a reason. Like we as humans have emotions for a reason. And that while some emotions feel less comfortable and they don't feel as good, and some emotions feel better, if we
Mhm.
can even just take out the lens and like the binary of like there's bad emotions, negative emotions, and positive emotions, right? Now, within that, the more that we can bring acceptance to our emotions, meaning like it's okay if I feel sad, like there's nothing wrong with
Mhm.
me for feeling sad, like sadness is
Mhm.
part of my experience right now. And then bringing curiosity to that of, okay, what does this sadness like want to share? What does it want to tell me? Oftentimes, sadness or anxiety or like those emotions, they are guiding us. They're often telling us, like, hey, I feel hurt, or hey, someone crossed my boundary and I feel angry. Like that doesn't feel okay for me.
Yeah.
Right. And so our emotions are often guiding us. Yeah. So I would say really just like creating a different relationship with our emotions, and you mentioned shame, like that's such a huge one, even around our emotions. Like this idea, like I should feel happy all the time. There's something wrong with me if I don't feel happy. And then this idea that there's something wrong with me is shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like just normalizing, and I'll just share from my personal experience, even this last week, like I came home from leading this like retreat in Costa Rica. It was like a huge highlight for me. It was a lot of expansion. It was such a beautiful experience holding space for my clients and being with them in person. And then I came home, and like while I love my life here, I felt like a low, and I noticed that I started to feel some depression coming in, and I was like on my computer a lot more, and like I was just in a different space, and it was a big adjustment for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that I was in my head a lot. I noticed that I was being hypercritical of myself and of others, my partner, my friends, etc. And I remember I was out with a friend, and I just shared with her, I was like, hey, like, I just want to let you know, like, I noticed that I'm feeling like some depression right now. Like, I noticed that I'm like not feeling, like myself. And I just want to name that. Like, if you're feeling any of that, like, that's what's coming up for me. And she was like, oh my God, like, thank you so much for sharing. Like I noticed you were more quiet than you normally are. Like thank you for sharing that with me, right? And even just naming it and then expressing that was super helpful. And then I shared it with another close friend, and then I shared it with my partner, and then I shared it with my therapist, and even just creating space to then feel those emotions, like allowing myself to feel sad, allowing myself to feel like low instead of judging it, that like shifted me right back into a space of alignment and a space of
Mm-hmm.
feeling good again. But I had to like acknowledge it, take it out of the shame, out of like the idea that there's something wrong, and then really allow myself to feel it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. There's so many pieces of magic in there. The reminder to communicate and let people know what you're feeling and be honest is so beautiful. And also, yeah, when we allow ourselves to feel what's there, we have to do that. That's what actually opens it up. When we meet that acceptance for what's there, that love, that curiosity, it can lead us into a completely new experience of the moment as well. Things can actually shift so much faster. And then you said something, yeah, the emotions. So I agree. I don't believe there's negative emotions. There's more negatively polarized emotions. If we're believing in those heavier states while they're happening, it can bring us into some really dark places where we identify more with that and think it's us, but really it's just an energy, it's an emotion that needs to move through us. It's a wave of something temporary. And that conscious choice that we get to make to have a certain perspective, awareness, relationship with it, and then what we do with that is what allows it to become positively polarized again, which it naturally would be if we just allowed the energy to move anyways. So it's really, I want to emphasize that piece which you articulated so beautifully about our belief around it, our choice, our awareness, and how we choose to name it, make space to feel it, and then move forward from there, especially if we can do that with other people and people you feel safe with, because it makes it even more real to the nervous system, for sure. I would love to know, and we can connect this into burnout as well, because this is something that I wanted to ask you about when it comes to just life and work and showing up in this world. What are some of the practices that you have for yourself and your nervous system and your alignment daily and consistently in your life to help support your energy and your radiance and your femininity? And if and when you experience burnout, what do you do to help yourself come back into that alignment? And how have you learned to do that?
Yeah, this is such a big one. And I feel like, everyone experiences some level of burnout.
Yeah.
I would consider myself as like a high achiever. I consider myself as someone who is very motivated, who wants to create big things in the world, who has big visions, who has big goals. And If I just like let that part of me be in the driver's seat all the time, like I would wake up and start working first thing in the morning and I would work most of the day and then like I would be exhausted at night. And I've been
Mhm.
through phases like that for sure. Part of what helps me to create more balance in my life is to have boundaries around my work. Especially as an entrepreneur, like I could be working all of the time, right? It's like, it's not like you clock in and clock out. Your business is, a big part of your life. And
Mhm.
so for me, I have certain times where I'm like, I know that in order for me to feel my best, like having space and time in the morning to do my meditation practice, to get some exercise in, to eat a good breakfast, like those things are really
Mhm.
important for me. So I usually don't start calls until 9:30 or 10 in the morning. Like that's like something that has really helped me. And then similarly at night, I have a time where I'm done working like on my computer, like I don't take calls after 6 p.m. But then
Mhm.
also even with my phone at night, I do my best to not look at my phone or not be on social media an hour before I go to sleep. So I
Mhm.
have these kind of like guidelines for myself. It's definitely not perfect, but it is really helpful for me. Um, I also like to incorporate some movement throughout the day instead of just like sitting at my desk all day. I like to turn on some music, move my body, go for a walk, like move
Mhm.
some of that energy so I'm not in my head the whole time because we just like build up stress. And even just posturally, if we're just sitting all day long, it creates a lot of built up tension in the body. So getting some movement in throughout the day, going for a nice walk. Um, I really do see my weekends as sacred. Like there are some weekends where I will do some work, but I really create these like sacred spaces where I'm enjoying my life. And that's part of the feminine. Like that is the feminine, is following your aliveness. Like, and I really like to support women in becoming more multidimensional, meaning like getting out of the role of being a business owner or a career woman or a mom. Like that's part of who you are, but it's not all of who you are. So exploring other passions. Like I did a ceramics class in the fall that I really loved, and I started playing and I've played, I love playing sports. So I played pickleball with some friends, or I started going for hikes more. And it's like exploring who you are outside of like the go, go, go getting shit done version of you, which is great. Like, I love that version of myself too. I appreciate her. She's created a lot, and like, I'm really proud
Mhm.
of her. And it's like, there's all these other aspects of me that I get to nurture too. So
Mhm.
those are some of the ways. And the last thing I'll say, like 100%, having a good sleep schedule and a good sleep routine is everything for
Mhm.
my emotional well-being, for my physical well-being, for my spiritual well-being. If I am tired and I'm not well rested, I am way more reactive. I am have way more negative thinking. It's harder for me to regulate my emotions. So for me, sleep is like a huge priority for me, and getting to sleep or getting into bed by 10 p.m. is like a non-negotiable for me.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. I need that in my life. Sleep has been something, even as a child, I didn't sleep. I wanted to be up at night. And sometimes I've learned as an adult to honor that in some seasons because that's been the way that I have had space to regulate or that quiet or that time to myself to really process things. And sometimes that's the least overwhelming time is when it's kind of dark and quiet. But it also is important to have that balance and to rest. And I love my sleep too, but I meditate a lot too. And so sometimes if I'm really regulated and rested, I won't need as much sleep or my schedule will shift a little bit. So it just depends on what I'm doing. But those are really important points. And I love that you mentioned that feminine aspect too, because even I have had to consciously explore that again in my life, realizing that I wasn't really allowing myself to have that human experience of doing things that I just loved, which is what I did as a kid. That's what made me so happy. I was always exploring and creating, right? We're in this space of play so much of the time and doing things that you love. And the ceramics reminded me of taking ceramics in high school and all of these little things. Like there was 2 years ago, there was this giant bouncy castle thing. It's like the biggest bouncy castle in the world or something that was in our city. And I was like, I have to go to this. And those moments and those memories and going to your favorite concert or going out with friends for some event or, little things like that. Even just going out to eat, that's one of my favorite things. It's why I love travel. And yeah, just inviting ourselves to do more of the things that we love and that inspire us, to really bring that essence of play and joy and fulfillment into our life too, and not only being in the doing mode because
Yeah.
that's not dropping us into our hearts the way that
Yeah.
we really need.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
One more thing that I'll add too is like, especially for women, honoring like our own rhythms and cycles. So if you look at like even just hormonally, like men have a 24-hour hormonal cycle where their cortisol, goes up and then it comes down, and they renew like their testosterone every single day. For women, we have a much more complex 28-day roughly cycle, 28 to 32 days, for some women longer than that. And so there are going to be different times in your cycle where it is actually healthy for you to be more productive and more
Mhm.
creative. And there's other times in your cycle where honoring rest is important. So on my calendar, I know when my next period's going to start. And the week before that, like especially the few days before that and the first couple days of my cycle, I don't schedule a lot of meetings. I do my best to take social things off my calendar. Like, I really do my best to honor that. And it's made such a big difference. And it's just a reminder, like, we are cyclical beings and we do need rest and recovery. It's just as important as the productivity. And the more that I've honored my cycle, the more productive that I've become, the more focused that I've become, the more creative that I've become, because I'm not fighting against my nature. I'm not fighting against my natural rhythm. So that's something that I'd love to add in here, especially with burnout, is like, as women, we're not supposed to work the same way that men are. And we have other gifts and things that we offer, and like we can still be really productive, but it's really important to honor our own physiology even.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for naming that too, because it's such a big part of our life. And I know in my experience living out of harmony with that cycle or not being as aware of it and how I change given those different times, is really destructive, or it can be. It's really a lot harder to do life sometimes and do human to be human, when you're not connected to that, and when you are, it just makes all the difference, which really comes back to the self-trust, the self-compassion, honoring ourselves and our rhythms and all of the things that make life truly feel aligned and fulfilling for us. And that's very important. So I love that you mentioned that. And one of the last things I want to ask you about before we kind of close things out is, I know you did a retreat recently, and I would love to hear what your journey's been in coming into leading retreats, and how your work has evolved over the years, and how you've evolved, and what led to creating this retreat, and how was it and what was the highlight, and just tell us about that experience. So anyone also listening who is inspired to connect with you, maybe come to one of your retreats, I would love for you to share about yourself and how people can connect with you, and tell us about the retreat if you want to.
Mhm. Thank you so much. Yeah, I would love to share about it. So, this retreat was called the Radiance Retreat, and it was my first international retreat. I hosted it in Costa Rica, and I had 12 amazing women. And then one of my former clients who came, she's a breathwork teacher and a Reiki practitioner. So there were 14 of us. And it was such a beautiful space for women to rest, to receive, to relax, and to reconnect with themselves. And each day we had a different theme that allowed them to go into those deeper layers of self healing, of releasing any of the tension in their body, any limiting beliefs, any stressors that had been building up, emotions that had been building up, really creating a safe space for women to get to be themselves, be their authentic selves, and to connect with other women in sisterhood. When there's spaces like that where everyone is there for growth, for healing, for expansion, we're all on a similar trajectory of, being our best selves and doing the deeper healing work. there's something that happens in those spaces for women that simply being seen, being witnessed, being surrounded by other like-minded women is so healing for us, especially if you're someone who has had a challenging relationship with women growing up like I did, had a lot of sisterhood wounds, like to get to experience what it feels like to feel accepted and loved and seen by other women. It is true soul medicine. So yeah, like such a nourishing space for women being connected to nature, doing lots of different rituals. And this retreat was really a blend of doing deeper healing work while combining that with play and fun and adventure. Because I think we can forget about that when we're doing deeper work. Like I've been on retreats and been in spaces where there's so much processing and it's so heavy. And like, I think there's a space for that and a need for that, depending on where you're at on your journey. And like, part of the feminine is about, having fun and being silly and laughing and playing and like coming back to that essence. So
Mhm.
that was the Radiance Retreat. I'm planning on hosting again next year in 2026 in February. So if you're interested, please reach out. There are only limited spaces, and this time it's sold out. So I'm anticipating that the next one will as well. Um, and I do also have an online mentorship called the Multidimensional Woman, and that's a 6 month mentorship, and we do a retreat for that as well. But that retreat's only for people who are in that program. So I'll have more information coming up about that soon. But yeah, just like the last piece around, my work evolving, like this was a dream for me for, I would say, the last 4 or 5 years. I had the vision of hosting an international retreat. And I've hosted 2 in-person retreats in the US, and they were amazing. They were shorter retreats than this one, but this really was a stretch into my next level of leadership. I think anytime you're stepping into something new and, to really be seen in that way and to hold that space for so many women, it does take a whole level of like self-trust and self-worth and also just like believing in your vision. And there were many times where I doubted it, where I was like, oh my God, can I do this? Is anyone going to come? And they did. And it was amazing. And it was because I said yes, because I was like, I'm not going to let those fears stop me from doing this. So, so much growth, so much expansion. And the last piece that I'll say about the work that I do, and I kind of shared an example of it today, is that I do a lot of work of embodiment and somatics, where like we're really healing ancestral and generational stuff that's in your nervous system, that's in your body. And doing that without as much mental processing. Like we don't always have to go into the story of why, but more so around like, let's clear it, let's release it, and then let's step into the embodiment of who you're becoming and align with that version of yourself. So, yeah, this work is so powerful for you on an individual level. It heals your relationships, your friendships, and then also a lot of women that I work with end up, really feeling inspired to step into their purpose, to follow their creative passions, to create a life that's more fulfilling for them as well.
Mhm. So
Mhm.
beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. And please connect with Amy if you feel inspired to. I will attach her links in the description. And so the last question that I will ask you, which I always close out all the episodes with, is kind of a two-part question because the bridge to me is part of becoming what we want to see in the world through our own embodiment, our own journeys, and that love is really always the way. And how we access that within ourselves is unique and also very valuable to the world, I believe. And so the question is for you, do you believe that our embodiment can change the world? And if so, what would you say if you had a broadcast out to the world right now from your experience, from your embodiment of the world that you want to see, an embodiment of love on this planet, harmony, ease, healing, whatever that is for you, what would you want to say to the world or to women, whatever is on your heart to say and share right now?
Mm. Yeah, I love this question. And I 100% believe that doing our own healing work and showing up in our embodied power as women is directly linked to healing the world. And when you are able to show up as your authentic self, and when you lean into those fears and you do this deeper healing work, you become the permission and you become the example for other women to know what's possible. So I know what's possible because I've seen other women do it. There are women listening to this podcast who are looking at you and I, or listening to you and I, and they're learning and they're like, oh my God, maybe one day I could have a podcast. Maybe one day I could speak, or I could be a coach or a teacher of some sort, you know? And it's even in the smallest ways, like you don't know the ripple effect that you have, even in just your relationships in your life. When you show up from an embodied place, like people feel more seen, they feel safer, they feel like they have permission to be themselves. And that is such a gift that we can give to the world.
Mm. Oh, I love that. I needed that. Thank you so much for amplifying that for us. It's so, so, so true. We are so connected, and I'm so in devotion to amplifying the heart of humanity. And it's in these moments of authenticity and just being radically honest and courageous in our life, and showing up and being willing for the magic, for the miracles, saying yes, even if you don't know where it's going to lead yet, and doing it for something bigger than yourself. So thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful and inspiring. And I'm so excited for everybody to listen to this, and to continue connecting with you, and for all the women who now get to connect with you from this. And thank you so much for being here today. It's been such a blessing to connect with you and have this conversation and to receive all of your wisdom. And I'm just very, very grateful. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who's listening today.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Bridge. You are so valued and appreciated here, and I hope it helped bring light, love, clarity, and healing to your journey of remembering who you are. If you'd like to share feedback, have questions, want to collaborate, or request for a specific guest or episode topic, you can email us at the email below. To connect with us on socials or to work with me one-on-one, you can head to the social medias in the description below. If you'd like to donate to support our mission to share love, peace, and unity on this planet, you will find a link for that as well. You can always reach out via email to ask us how you can support what we are currently doing in the world. If there is someone you feel inspired to directly support, please let us know and we will share their story in one of our episodes. Remember, together we are better and truly can do so much. Now it's that time. Go live this new wisdom you received here in your life. Share it, integrate it, pass it on. Your ripples are powerful and needed, and you have a unique way of sharing and being that only you can be. As always, take what resonates for you and leave the rest. You are sovereign. You are the magic wand. You are the bridge to experiencing the world that you want. You are the conductor of your destiny. See it, choose it, speak it, feel it, believe it, know it, and go be it. Remember, it always starts with you. The universe is always on your side, and you are infinite. One love, and we'll see you in the next one.